Welcome back to my second installments of all things reflection, coming out of the triggers around what has happened in Afghanistan. And I just want to begin by the question I get myself asked a lot, which is, if it's such a big problem, that means what military veterans are going through. If it's such a big problem, why don't we have generals talking about it? Why don't we have senior officers who are either in service or have retired talking about it? It's a good question. I must admit to that, because I think our conditioning is that if something is important enough, then those we perceive to be in a better or a higher position socially and in terms of just responsibility, we assume that they should be the ones who are most vocal, right? I'll tell you what I have found to be true for myself. I could be wrong, but I know it's also something that I've had repeated by others. And I think I just thought further about it in terms of if that is the case, why, right? So what I'm wearing today, I got this shirt, which was essentially supposed to bear proof that the military was concerned about HIV within its rank and file. It looks fairly newish, right? That's because it is. And that's because the idea of normalizing HIV and AIDS within the rank and file is something that is so recent, it would blow your mind. And this was way after, 2000, when HIV was declared a national disaster by the then president. He's deceased now. And it was way after the country had taken measures to address stigma at home and in the workplace to do with HIV and AIDS. It was shocking to me when, as a newly minted officer, I just witnessed the kind of discrimination that soldiers, irrespective of whether you are commissioned or not, experienced in terms of stigma. And unlike now, back then, if you tested positive for HIV, you could not be promoted, you could not go for an overseas course, you could not go for American overseas deployment, you could not be deployed for any mission. And essentially, you would just burn out. The stigma was not just in practice, but it was also in words. And of course, all kind of vocalization was to indicate that the one who had caught the illness was immoral. And although we knew that was not necessarily true or the case, or, you know, in the face of a threat to public health, that was insignificant, right? So you just imagine that. We are at an era where the rest of the country has normalized HIV and AIDS. And then you have this group of people who, inside their little world, are as still as archaic as the early 80s, mid 80s. And there was no way, absolutely no way, any external pressure would have changed the practices that were going on. And there was absolutely no way the sufferers would have vocalized what they were going through. So what led to the changes? What led to the motivation to normalize HIV and AIDS and get those infected and affected into a treatment model that was not punitive, but that which brought dignity to their life and living? I think more than anybody else, the partnership through the George Bush initiative for providing support for HIV and AIDS for Africa went a long way, as did the military exchange aspect of it, where now you had Walter Reed involved and a lot of money that was, yes, we come back to the money, and a lot of money that was poured in. It was interesting because it now turned out that the liaison people between the Kenya Armed Forces, as it was known at the time, and the US government through their military actually needed to be a retired military officer. That's how it turned out. There are very many opportunities for retired military officers that can be aided by the high-ranking military officers in service. It's a very big reason why retired military officers, generals and other senior officers will always be good boys and girls, so that they may receive consideration for secondment, and therefore anything that would appear to speak to the military falling short or needing to do more, or a critique, never say a word. They're just waiting to be chosen, waiting to be picked. A second reason why the HIV and AIDS management and care made a turnaround in the military was because senior officers began not only to talk about it, but get tested. Not necessarily make their results public, but make it public that they were getting tested. And they invited soldiers within the various ranks and files to come and be witness to that. So I'm not saying that they disclosed their status. I'm saying that they took the test in the visual vicinity of soldiers. It made all the difference to them. And this is because there's such a mentality in the military that if an officer does it, it must be good. If an officer does it, then I am safe to follow. If an officer does it, then it is worth my while to follow. What does what I'm saying have to do with the care and protection for military veterans who have not only suffered physically but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, financially, economically, because of being engaged in this war that is in its 10th year? The underlying issues remain the same. The underlying obstacles remain the same. And the solutions therein remain the same. I can just see you now asking, oh, but why? It's not like all military officers will be chosen anyway. It's not like there are those many positions. But well, the thinking is that it could be me, so why would I jeopardize that, right? But I think even for those who even like get that opportunity and finish, they always expect another opportunity will present itself, but also they don't want to jeopardize that which they've been able to, I suppose, collect over time that is meant for their personal comfort. And I guess this goes way back into my being able to understand how all that came to be. You know, the military is not a place where individuals from extremely wealthy families enlist into. And if you actually examine historically, whether it was the first president's family or the second president's family, they were brought into the military as a way to teach them a lesson, like some form of discipline. And it was always dramatic. You know, there are stories up to date about these boys and the havoc they caused to the trainers. But what is common is that none of them lasted. None of them stayed. And the military is a kind of a place where you get picked from a place that is so the word is not even remote, that is so far removed from the reality of how your life could have turned differently if it was any other situation. You know, like you exceed the expectations of where you're from. And I guess over time, as the power grows, as the influence grows, as the money grows, as the ability to control grows, so does the identity with what rank, money, and position can do to the ego. And so there's that identification of I am my ability to be comfortable. I am my ability to influence. I am my ability to take care of, you know, this vast number of humans, or no, including myself. But I guess most importantly, it is the fear that through some form of irresponsibility, they can slide back to that life that they came from. And they're not going to risk that. Because between them and that life that they came from, there's nobody. So there's no cushion. There is no net that will hold them. And that actually is the sheer definition of that is a life, you know, that would qualify as one of great indignity. I remain hopeful that a time will come where the conversation about mental health will be had by generals, by senior officers in active service, that they will find their true courage and talk about what they have been going through. They can talk about what they have gone through. And they can be able to talk about what has helped them to be resilient. And they can talk about how access to those resources that was given to them can be made available to everyone else who is serving and who has ever served. So I remain hopeful. So I realized I didn't talk about these shorts that I'm wearing. And these shorts were issued as part of the kit of basic training. Yeah. So of course there's a whole narrative about that. And I guess the question is, how have they survived all these years? Well, that's because you get two sets of everything. One you use every day, and the other one you leave out to be able to spread on your bed every day. So this is one of those. Yeah.